Hello, world. It's been a minute. Jacob from Past the Rock coming here to give you another solo shot while we're in our little interim period here as our beloved Rangers are handling just the hardest fucking World Series in the world. And I only say that because every World Series is the hardest in the world when it's your favorite team playing in it. And the Dallas Cowboys, who I just finished watching, beat up a Rams team that kind of sucked. But we're not here to talk about those sports today. And good time, my friends. Today is a full NBA season preview. I'm going to try to do this in a fairly rapid fire succession kind of way, but we're not going to try to miss anybody or shortchange any lines. We just want you to know exactly what's going on. We're not going to get into any of the gambling stuff. We'll kind of have fun with that later on. We'll also get into how we're going to talk about the midseason tournament, try to figure out exactly what that's going to look like, anticipate who's going to be teams that actually give a crap about it, teams that are going to maybe more or less just laugh this new thing off. I will say, though, a pretty cool Michael Imperioli preview that commercial that they have going around. So if you haven't seen that, go give it a click. And then before I really get into the NBA stuff, I wanted to shout out the girls in the Las Vegas Aces for their back-to-back titles. If you did not catch that, it ended up being quite a series. Chelsea Gray got injured, I think game 3. Ended up looking like that could have turned the tide. Ended up not being the case because the Aces are a loaded team, and Asia Wilson's still the best player in basketball, and that's just sort of the way it is. And I think the New York Liberty will be back next year. It was quite a contentious finish to that series, and I am very, very excited for next year. Obviously, want the Dallas Wings to be representing in that final round, but if for the betterment of the league, it's probably the better way to go with an Aces Liberty follow-up match for a three-peat for the Aces, and then for to crown Sabrina, who seems to be the media darling or the business side of this whole thing's darling, and Stewie, who's obviously one of the greatest of all time, Jonquel Jones, roster full of talented women. So love to see a rematch of that series next year, and we will probably get back to small bouts of WNBA coverage around March next year. So be on the lookout for that. So the NBA, talking about the National Basketball Association. Putting the Spurs stuff, putting the Mavericks stuff to the side. We'll get back to the Texas two-step with the guys on our normal regularly scheduled recordings. Today, we're just going to give you that first primer, that first toe in the water into this NBA season. In case you haven't kept up with all the storylines, it's a very dramatic league. And so that's just going to be the nature of the beast. Is there's going to be infinite storylines and all these things I'm even going to tell you are probably going to change at least 4 or 5 times. That's just the fun of it. We're about 2 to 3 games for everybody right now. I think only like Milwaukee has just 1 game as I'm recording it, about 4 on Sunday. So there's even games already going on today. For me, I just wanted to let you guys know how I'd be watching this. I think I've talked about it a little bit with the fellas, but I'll be doing national televised games. That'll be kind of how I start this first half of the season, staying with those, kind of doing a lot of my normal box score hunting. That's really just an important part of keeping track of lineups. I do that on fromthejump.net / the association. If you go on there, just click the NBA at the top of the website, and you'll find a link to what I'm talking about here. So where I actively keep up with rotations. There's a bunch of other tools that are really useful as well for me. News wires from Hoops Hype, Twitter lists that I probably need to update, but are decent still. Some great podcast recommendations for each team that are people that not necessarily the athletic, or there are some athletic, there are some locked on. There's also some smaller guys that I just really appreciate their opinions and insight onto their teams. So I keep them around. The subreddits, the team YouTube channels, Spot Track, of course, for salaries, and then actually a Real GM draft pick tracker, which is one of the best tools an NBA fan could have because draft pick tracking is a nightmare. So yeah, that's basically how I'll be doing it throughout the season. Obviously, we will focus on the show more in the Spurs Mavericks side of this whole thing. But if you need to have a tool that'll help you figure out a little bit more about what's going on, who's in, who's out, where the rotations seem to stand, where they're guys that are a little more on the fringe. I think my website does a really good job of giving you a lot of those tools, especially if you already kind of know what you're doing. This puts it all in one place really easily. For this breakdown, I'm going to go ahead and just do this by division. And this is the order I have it on the website. I think I just stole the standings from whatever time it was to make my life easier. So that's probably it's pretty random order. It can be changed. I might change it eventually, but for now, I'm just lazy and keeping it. And we're going to start off with the Eastern Atlantic. And, well, that would have been better if I would have clicked the right button. The Boston Celtics. They are coming into this season tied with the best championship odds with the Milwaukee Bucks. We will get to closer to the end of the Eastern side of things. They have a revamped roster. They made a big decision to move on from Marcus Smart, bring in Kristaps Porzingis, ton of talent, guy we know very well locally here in Dallas. Probably not with the best of opinions on. I have a little bit of better opinion of those, but still a lot of question marks to go on with KP as far as injuries go. But the early returns look amazing. This looks like a team that certainly could be a very, very, very difficult team to beat if they can form, stay healthy, and probably even adapt a little bit and add a little bit. And I think when you look at the top end, Tatum, Brown, KP, Drew Holiday, and then you kind of have this, I guess Derek White's always probably going to be the guy in there. It's more of an Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis sub that you have the option with there. And then you have your fringe rotation, at least how I see it at the moment, where Sam Hauser's a good shooter. They have the defense to protect him. How much is that going to be useful? Peyton Pritchard, similar thing. I think Peyton Pritchard will lock himself into the rotation any more than he already has. Just about a sure need. You know what I mean? He's a talented guy. They have the need now a little bit moving around the guards. They have White and Holiday being able to be combo guards, Jaylen Brown being able to play up at the three at times. So that'll help. That'll help a lot with Peyton Pritchard getting minutes. And, we'll all forget that he requested a trade at the end of last year. Luke Cornett's still having fun doing the jump man. Luke will stay on the team. I don't know how much he'll help. Svi Mykhailiuk is kind of the Sam Hauser replacement in a way. So who knows if Svi will even continue to be on the team. But really the two guys I want to key in on, O'Shea Brissett, who just came off a really nice game, game 2, I believe, of their season, and Lamar Stevens, who has yet to play. But I think those are very similar players. Brissett has a much higher upside as an athlete. And you saw he's very much the kind of glue guy that the Celtics need. So my money is on Brissett emerging, potentially even being quite a big X factor and swing player for the Celtics, just because if they keep the rest of this core healthy, maybe they get a buyout player that helps as a shooter, whatever, maybe an extra big, whatever it is. But ultimately, O'Shea Brissett is just that low-cost, high-value player that all of the top-end teams are going to need. And I think that I was a little surprised that he even got this far in his career to where he's just a mid-level guy. I thought somebody would have realized, hey, let's at least keep this guy under a controlled contract because he's got a lot of athleticism and he understands sort of how to do these little things, and that's always useful in the modern NBA. But nevertheless, he's in Boston, and that could be the greatest thing that happened for both him and the Celtics. That remains to be seen. Like I said, we're going to be keeping moving this fast, so that's pretty much it for Boston. We'll get into it as we go, but that's the need to know on the Celtics. The Brooklyn Nets, a team that couldn't have been more in the storylines last year, isn't really much in the storylines at all this year. Ben Simmons will obviously be the biggest thing people have eyes on. He's their X factor, obviously, for making a playoff run, in my mind. Not because they don't have enough talent around it with the way this is currently set up. It's just, I think for him, anything less than setting himself up to return to all whatever form next season is imperative this season. I don't think he needs to get that far. I don't think he needs to be all-star, all-NBA, or even all-defense, right? I just think that he has to play the full season he can, get back into a flow, establish what he's already done, what he can do, And I think that'll help the Nets a lot because he's not their best player. He could be again still. I'm not completely rolling it out, but at this point, Mikal Bridges is. Cameron Johnson's a great asset to the team, a high value role player. Cam Thomas is an interesting scorer. He's kind of the early note here where he's still putting up hella buckets. And it's kind of like, if you're an old head, it's kind of like Lou Williams or Jamal Crawford just getting their own team and a fairly good defensive team built around it and just going out and getting buckets for it. So don't know how long that kind of continues, but it's something I'll definitely monitor because Cam Thomas is quite the bucket getter. He is. I don't know if you would say the most ethical bucket getter in the world, but for all the hooper hoopers, Cam Thomas is definitely your guy. Their bench doesn't really matter ultimately in my mind because I don't see them as some sort of contender. I mean, they have some nice pieces, but ultimately the bench only really matters to me about the teams that I'm going to have to squeegee down to 7-8 players in playoffs. So probably not going to dip too much into those. I think there's the only last kind of story point with the Nets this year is that they're going to be one of those teams who's always going to be in the trade rumor game. I think that everybody's going to want pieces of that group. I just think that when you think about the potential of Ben Simmons, Nick Claxton, and Mikal Bridges being healthy and playing their best basketball, that's about as dominant of a defensive roster as I could ever imagine. Like I just don't see anything really. I mean, yeah, there's better stuff historically, but this, in this version of the NBA, that's a really strong tandem to build around. And so it's possible that this team still sort of hovers in the 500 mode. They don't really have any incentive to tank. So I certainly think it's possible. Moving on to one of the most polarizing franchises in all of professional sports, the New York Knicks. This team pretty much feels like the same team from last year. It's a team with a lot of assets, a lot of talent, but not necessarily a clear window in how to jump into the next level. Because what they have now, barring an RJ Barrett leap, and I mean a leap, I don't really see what their path to being one of the big dogs is, at least at the moment right now. The second a superstar becomes available, a true blue superstar that they're willing to bid whatever for comes available, they've got the assets and they'll do it. I don't doubt that, just depending on player, I suppose. But this is kind of a holding pattern, I feel, for Knicks fans. And I know there's going to be some frustration here. I think that really adds to what Julius Randle, the pressure Julius Randle has on him, Julius is a hell of a player. But, I think that the frustration is going to continue to be put on him because this team doesn't, only goes as far as its best player. He's the best player. It's just how it goes. One thing I will say, positive note here for the Knicks. This looks good. Dante DiVincenzo looks like a great addition to this group, but it's still sort of the same problem, even with DiVincenzo. The positive I'm taking away, early returns on the minutes. Thibodeau's leaning to the younger guys, not putting Evan Fournier and Archie Diacono out there. So I kind of just happy for that. I mean, Fournier, that they'll probably end up trying to move his contract for something valuable. That would be the hope, I'm sure. But who knows? He might just be here for another year. Might be in the buyout situation down the road. Archie Diacono, just another Villanova guy, the guy who gets Thibs' system, just a bet to have on the end of the bench. Doesn't bother me. I just don't want him prioritized over the potential of a Miles McBride, even the excitement of a Dylan Windler, who has shown flashes when he was in Cleveland of being that kind of, like we just talked about with Sam Hauser with the Celtics, or with Svi Mikhailuk, just come off the bench, don't completely get your ass destroyed on defense, and shoot some shots. So we'll see. I'm just happy that Thibs is understanding the young guys are talented and giving them a shot, and understanding that the old guys are the old guys and their contract is what it is, and you can't help that. Got to do what's best for the team. I don't even have Evan Fournier on my website list, and that's kind of disrespectful, but I'm not going to change it. All right. The Philadelphia 76ers. a lot of speculation I might not like Philadelphia 76ers basketball. I definitely like Philadelphia 76ers basketball. I just hate the Eagles. And so as a result, you guys just are going to be we're going to be adversarial. It's just how it's going to be. But like at the end of the day, I want to see the Sixers succeed. I like Joel Embiid. I like what they built. I want to see them succeed. So it's not as a bias as you might think. That being said, the James Harden situation is not clear at all. The Clippers seem to have stepped away. The Bulls seem to have stepped up. And no one really knows what that saga is going to end in. We just know that he's continuously out for what I believe they're calling reconditioning. So whatever that process is, whatever that takes, if Harden comes back, does what he has to do in order to keep complicit until they can actually pull off the deal, that's awesome, fine. I don't think the Sixers need that. I don't necessarily want to bring that into the situation, but Daryl Morey's steadfast about not wanting to take a bad offer. The more I've watched the first 2 games of the season, the more I'm starting to think, hey, maybe just chipping his contract into 2 players, useful players like the Mavs did with KP, isn't the end of the world here. It may not be the option he wants, but it doesn't feel like the end of the world here for me. This team is really good. Tyrese Maxey feels like he's taking a leap and has felt like that way. Like it's continuously gotten better. He's not James Harden, but I mean, that's as good of a replacement as you can ask for given the circumstances they're in. I have concerns with Nurse. I think it's something we'll talk about with the next team, but I have some concerns with Nurse, but I really do feel like he's the initial spark this season potentially to give them that edge to get the most out of a Kelly Oubre, which he's done so far. I mean, and maybe that's just on Kelly too. I don't want to, and they really got the full Kelly Oubre experience in game 1, so I shouldn't get too high on the Kelly Oubre train right now. But it does feel like he's a natural fit for this group. What Joel does is great. This offense having a little bit more modern stylings and thoughts is probably going to open up what they've been doing and how stagnant it has been in the past, even with Harden. But I am excited. I think this group is really nice together. I think Tobias Harris has a lot to prove. I don't really know what the PJ Tucker situation is up. If he stays happy, he stays there. I mean, obviously he's not going to score shit for points, but the energy thing he gives them, what I don't love is relying on Patrick Beverley and Danny Green. I think Paul Reed is fun, but Paul Reed isn't that great. You know what I mean? You're holding Korkmaz just hostage over here. I think they really need to think about making this team deep instead of just waiting for the next superstar to pair with Joel. Maybe I'm wrong. I just feel like this team isn't that far away, and Joel is that special a player if he fixes some of his bullshit. So I guess I just have a hard time completely selling out on the rumors that Joel might be the next superstar to go. I don't think it's impossible because it's been quite a crazy journey for Philly, but it doesn't feel like this team is that far away this season even. If they could just fix this James Harden thing, get him on board, they could really finish the job they should have finished last year, in my mind. But it's a lot of time to play out that stuff. And frankly, I can't tell you how James Harden's going to look when he gets back or when they're going to let him back. And I can't tell you what the hell's going on in Daryl Morey's mind. If I could, I'd probably have a fucking 6-figure job at the ESPN. Toronto Raptors. So they seem happier because there's a new coach, and I'm glad for that. But this is pretty much the same thing with the Knicks, where it's like, this is pretty much the same team. The only difference is I don't really know how they take that leap because it's like, more or less, they are the people sitting on the trade market guys. Siakam and OG Anunoby have been very, very coveted recently. Obviously, Scotty Barnes isn't going anywhere. That's the guy they want to build this whole thing around, and he's looking good so far. His leap could keep this team from bottoming out. But what is that? What is that? You know what I mean? Schroeder looks nice, looks like a good guard for them to have had for what they needed. But what is this team? How does it get closer to competing for a title? This doesn't feel like a title contender. The bench is pretty porous. In fact, it's old. And they're babying Grady Dick along. I'm sure he's a really talented player. I think that he has that Tyler Hero potential with the scoring, not just because he's white, but because he's scored and can't play shit. But I don't expect him to play shit for defense. That's why I give him that. So I think you see a nice potential moving forward. It's just like, how do I get to that next step this year? I don't know. I think in my notes here, Precious Achua kind of stands out to me here. They have a lot of less useful guys that they can move as far as contracts go. But when you're talking about an actual asset that might get you something back, I'm a little interested in Precious Achua. His versatility is more useful to other teams that don't necessarily have a Jakob Podol, that don't necessarily have the size of a Scotty Barnes, that don't necessarily have an OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. I think that might be the path. Maybe that's the player plus whatever. Get yourself an X factor that kind of helps this team look like a more serious contender, because otherwise it kind of feels like you're just wallowing in your own mediocrity at this point. So that's kind of the way I feel about the Raptors. Trying to look at that division quickly, I think the Celtics being favored is fair. If I had to pick the worst team in that division, I do think it's probably the Toronto Raptors. Fuck, that's tough. Raptors, Nets staring at each other hard. This is a good division, though, so I'm not mad about who I pick. I think all 5 of these teams can be a play-in team. I'm going to lean with the Toronto Raptors being fuck. That sucks. I'm going to just go Raptors, but fuck, that sucks. Honestly, it could even be the Knicks if this thing goes really porous and just kind of stagnates. But anyway, we're going to the Eastern Central and Michael Jordan's old team, the Chicago Bulls. And we are not going to be talking about a functional group that could win their division. In fact, they could win their division, but at this moment, I think it's almost an unanimous opinion that this is the most likely team to go and cause a ripple effect throughout the league. Players only meeting after game 1. That's incredible. I don't know if that's ever happened before. I'm sure if it had, maybe that tweet would already be going nuts viral. So I'm going to assume that it probably hasn't. They bounce back well in the second game. Then bam, you get a big fucking face plant the next night, or the next time out. It's very early. So it's really inappropriate to completely write it all off. But your last game, 2 of your starters got, look, the power of 0 combined for fucking still 0. 2 starters. I think guys that played close to 48 minutes. That's fucked. That's like hard to do. I mean, the Clippers had a loss the other night where they got like 15 total points out of the non-PG Kawhi starters and almost won the game. That's embarrassing. You can't have nothing. And Patrick Williams is still a plus minus, which is hilarious because obviously he's a good defender. This guy just can't produce elsewhere at all. So that's not great. The Caruso stuff is kind of nice because it's like, hey, this is unfortunate that we're kind of wasting it, but if this blows up, Alex Caruso could just drop a random, really nice pick in our lap because someone's going to overpay for that this time in the trade deadline. But yeah, I just don't love this team. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's not a bad team. It's not a great team. It's gotten into James Harden rumors. It's still dealing with the Lonzo Ball issue that is just unfathomable on so many levels. I don't know what to do with this team. It feels like they're going to blow up. I kind of can be. I would be talked into the DeMar DeRozan for James Harden trade just to get DeMar onto those Sixers and kind of let that run. But otherwise, I just, god damn, this team's tough. Zach LaVine, 51 points, 0 assists. That is the kind of fuck it, I'm going to do me thing that really concerns me about their future. Moving on to the Cleveland Cavaliers, who should be coming into this season with high expectations. What did they have? Cleveland just put up a big thing for Cleveland? And then it was the number 4 instead of 4. And it's Garland, it's Mitchell, it's Jared Allen, and it's Evan Mobley. So obviously I don't want to completely piss on the excitement in Cleveland. I'm not going to sit here and be like, Donovan Mitchell is going to the New York Knicks. not gonna be that guy. But there's some very serious concern here, and those guys are going to ramp up their rhetoric hard on this team if it doesn't get quick answers, right? Max Strus came out in his first game, looked great. Isaac Okoro, same. What is the consistency, though, moving forward, right? That position is the biggest. The wing production is massive. Karis LeVert is a great sixth man. When he's a starter, it makes me want to puke. So one of those two guys, Isaac Okoro, Max Strus, has to really, 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 really step into that. And it really has to be Okoro because you need it on the defensive end too. So Okoro is kind of the biggest X factor here. And that's why I guess there's a lot of concern for the mediocrity that did get Mitchell to ask out of Utah, right? But we'll see. I don't want to jump to those conclusions because at the end of the day, you still have this great tandem. You still have this really talented, two different tandems in your front court and your back court that are really, really talented and young. And I don't want to just bail on that quickly. However, the NBA is not kind to this kind of thing, and the Cavaliers are going to have to answer a lot of that. And while I may not be ready to spend the season talking about Donovan Mitchell trades, the national media is certainly. And with the Knicks not having that, with that's just it's never going away. So that's also an added pressure on this team. That's just another part of this equation. Filling out the bench is gonna be key too, because I mean at the top end these guys should be contending, and George Nang I like, but I don't. That's for me to feel like he's solidly locked into your rotation right now, but I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's a sign of what your roster really is in the depth department. We'll see. We'll see what you get out of some of these guys, and Rubio's just going to probably end up taking the season off, if not coming into it real late. And then even with Rubio, you're talking about another offensive guard that can't play defense, and I just don't know, or it can't impact the defense. So I just don't know what the path is for Cleveland if it's not a move. If they don't get to capitalize on some other team exploding, I don't know where Cleveland goes. And that's why the national media is waiting to pounce like fucking vultures. The Detroit Pistons. Not my pick to win this division at all, but kind of a team I'm starting to keep my eye on as a surprise threat for the play-in/playoffs. Now, is the depth trash? Yes. Is the youth there? Yes. But I'm kind of excited about the three guys that I think make up their core, right? Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart, the man infamously known for trying to square up with LeBron. Jalen Duren, a very young, talented big man that I'm still amazed fell to where he fell. And then Cade Cunningham, DFW superstar product, like Tyrese Maxey that I mentioned before, but I didn't mention that, so I have to mention that they're both DFW kids. And if there's health with those three guys, that's a really nice defensive group, even if it's not the best in the world offensively. That kind of gives me a lot of hope. They're feeling good, too, to start the season. They don't have Bojan Bogdanovic, and they don't have Monte Morris. Two guys I absolutely think would be in the rotation, maybe even potentially starters on the roster. So a lot of us came into this season thinking the Pistons would just be bad again and that they would be the ones shopping Bojan and maybe even Monte Morris, and maybe even Joe Harris, maybe even a couple of these other bigs that they've acquired. Alec Burks, that's going to be a big name. But we're kind of looking at a future where I don't know that that's the reality. I kind of don't think they'll make the playoffs, but if they're the team really fighting for that 10th seed to get into the play-in, I don't think I'd be surprised. I really don't. But I do think that it's a very bad probability just because health is so important to them. And the margin for error is a big part of this. And the margin for error in an 82-game season is really, really shitty. And that is just not great when it's youth on top of thin roster. So, again, Pistons fans, this is probably the most excited you've ever felt, but you've felt in a very long time. Probably, I guess, what is it, Blake Griffin trade, where Blake came out and was still an all NBA player that first year. This is this is a great group. This is a really fun core, and I mean, it's going to be interesting to see Asar Thompson and Killian Hayes and how they work with this starting five. If this continues to be the starting five, if one of those guys gets moved on from, Jaden Ivey's a great talent. Is he fine with coming off the bench until he's a more efficient player? Because he needs to be, but it doesn't always work out that way. He's a very talented kid. So hopefully he is. And I really think that could pay off in the long run too, because then you're talking about like a really true all-star caliber talent being your sixth man, you know? So Pistons have something to be excited about, but it's very tough when you're this little incubator getting all this talent, and you got to not only develop it, but you got to make sure it all kind of flows together appropriately, and you don't hold on to some things too long, and you don't let too much go, because the chemistry of teams are just so fickle. The Indiana Pacers. Playoffs are bust again. Pretty Ricky got re-upped on the offseason and is starting off not playing his first-round pick, Jarris Walker, much, which definitely hurts my heart. But Pacer fans, it's not a big deal. Your team's just really talented. Maybe not super top-end talented, but you've got a lot of NBA guys. That's useful. You've got a lot of guys that, and Miles Turner have been there for a bit. They can establish the culture. A lot of exciting youth, and Benedict Mathurin, Tyrese Halliburton. Got some old heads that are kind of an interesting flux, I would say, with Buddy Hield, maybe TJ McConnell. And then you've got some guys who maybe need to prove it, where Jalen Smith, Andrew Nimhard, Isaiah Jackson, guys, Jarris Walker, obviously, guys who have had success in the past or have great potential for success in the future. And I would like to see kind of where that ends up playing out. Obviously, I think Tyrese Halliburton is going to be a story for this team, likely to make an all-star team, maybe even get as far as All-NBA. Question is what is Pretty Ricky's defense going to look like around him? Tyrese Halliburton, not a world beater at the defensive end, even though he's a pretty lanky guy. So it's really not the worst problem in the world to have. You just kind of have to cover around him, right? And you have to do that with your star players pretty much anyways all the time. So I'm pretty good with this group. I would definitely call it a disaster if they didn't make the playoffs. But ultimately, it's still a bit of a team on the ascend, not necessarily the team ready to hit send on a big trade. The team that did do that, the Milwaukee Bucks. As I said earlier, tied for the best championship odds with the Boston Celtics after making a massive splash in trading for Damian Lillard. First game, Dame time went off really well. Giannis looked amazing. Definitely going to get called for traveling quite a bit this season. You can tell that he's integrating some of these spin moves and some of this post stuff, and I'm excited about it. But it's probably going to be quite a learning curve. And the officials are probably going to have to feel more responsibility to actually police that, because it's such a disadvantage whenever he does master this. So that's probably likely a situation. On the negative side, you are already starting the season off nursing a Chris Middleton injury, which is pretty much the only thing that I think would really put this season into a complete turmoil mode. Although it didn't get started off in the best situation either. Head coach Adrian Griffin in his first year had a pretty weird beef with his assistant, Terry Stotts, former head coach of the Blazers, Damian Lillard's team, and former head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks for a little bit, actually. So Stotts, whatever the disagreement was, agreed to disagree and then left the team. So that's a really weird way to start your season for a head coach, assistant coach squabble. Probably could be nothing, but it's just one of those things where it's like nothing now, but then at the end when it doesn't work, maybe it's the first domino. Who knows? That's always going to be an issue with these teams. We've talked about it already a few times. Marjon Beauchamp, campaign definitely have a great potential to impact on an already great rotation in my mind. Dame Lillard, Giannis, Brook Lopez, Jay Crowder, Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis. Maybe Connaughton and Crowder, I feel a little, from year to year on. Malik Beasley kind of thrown into that group. I think there's, just like for the Lakers last year, there's a lot of potential there, but what will the result actually be? I will say that Malik probably has a better defensive situation here in Milwaukee than he did in LA. Doesn't matter. Can he make the shots? That's really it. It's really it with him. And, can he make the catch and shoot shots, not just the in rhythm dribble shots? So it's a role you have to play on these teams, but he's a torch. When he's good, he's a torch. So that will be sort of an X factor for them. They've got some young kids who are really talented. People thought maybe could impact an Andre Jackson and Chris Livingston. I think Chris Livingston's too far out. I think Andre Jackson's a distinct possibility, but really we're talking about injuries at that point. Division winner, Milwaukee Bucks. Worst team in the division, Chicago Bulls. All right. Atlanta Hawks in the East-Southeast division. Talking about dysfunction. I really like the head coach, Quinn Snyder. I really think there's a lot of fair argument to him changing the dynamic and really getting the most out of Trae Young's Hawks. But there's a reality that this team sort of sucks in a lot of ways. Let's put all the Trae Young stuff aside, because I think everyone at this point kind of understands that. You've got a whole drama going on with the owner's son running the team. Don't love that. You got it's a really talented group, very combustible in my mind. I think there's a lot of parts that could easily start. I mean, Sadiq Bey already had this sort of happen and moved from the Pistons. DeJounte Murray, obviously, and the Spurs didn't quite see eye to eye, come to find out. Clint Capella basically was traded at one point in this offseason. All of those things, not awesome when you pile them up. One positive, Jalen Johnson's starting to emerge. Quinn Snyder trusts him a little bit more. We're very happy to see that. I like him. He's a really talented player. Didn't have a great, 1 year at Duke, but incredible talent of a kid. The weird question, though, why AJ Griffin and Kobe Buffkin are basically just out, and maybe it's just as simple as a redundancy thing. AJ Griffin getting a little bit of minutes, but really down from what you would expect after last year. I would assume that's a defensive thing. And that kind of worries me, because then that's where I'm really like, are we all communicating here? Because if there's too many guards that can't play defense, why the fuck are they all on the same team? Why aren't we hoarding guys that can play but all have the same problem on the same roster? Who's making that decision? So again, I say, what the fuck is the Hawks? But I guess if there's one positive about the Hawks is they haven't quite been the shit show the Charlotte Hornets have been this offseason. We've covered a lot of that stuff, so we're not going to go too much into all that. You just have to kind of summarize it by saying, on one hand, you have a bunch of fans denouncing their fandom due to the lack of reaction to Miles Bridges' continuous legal issues. And then on the other, you have a really talented young group led by a really talented LaMelo Ball and a really talented Brandon Miller, who seems to be the team's sixth man, based off of seniority mostly. But, that's a good starting five. I wouldn't say it's the best starting five in the world, but you can see where Brandon Miller wouldn't necessarily just crack that starting five, even though it was a bad team last year. And that's kind of the best situation you could be asking for. I think this kid can really produce, but this is going to be a tough one for him. He's going to have to learn a lot of the efficiency stuff. He's going to learn a lot of defensive stuff. Just go get your buckets and don't worry about the wins and losses. That's LaMelo's job. That's Gordon Hayward's job. That's PJ Washington's job. You're just going out there to get buckets. All the rest of the crap with this team, man, I can't even. Next team. The Miami Heat, runners up from the finals. Not much has changed. They did basically draft the most Miami Heat player ever in Jaime Jaquez. So great for them. Looks like a solid rotation piece already. They are already kind of playing with minutes, not being afraid to rest people. We all know Eric Spoelstra is a sicko and doesn't mind playing all the way to the last man on the bench. We know they don't particularly give a shit about where they get in. They just want to get in when it comes to the playoffs. So it's always a fun team. I think one of the biggest notes that I kind of have on this team is like, hey, we know everybody here. Tyler Hero trade rumors out that fucking ass this offseason. How do you respond? Um, and then sort of the other thing is someone's going to take over this team, uh, or take over for this team off the bench. It just always happens. It's a virtual lock that some random person that was on the bench all last year is just going to come out for Miami and be instantly a rotation player. Two candidates right now, Drew Smith and Nikola Jovic. Nikola Jovic wasn't looking too hot to start, but then thanks to all these injuries, got quite a nice start and should probably earn more minutes over guys like Thomas Bryant, who probably just got the nod being veteran recent signings. So that's the business being the business. Nikola Jovic could be the X factor to help the Miami Heat get back to play Nikola Jokic. We shall see. The Orlando Magic are the next team on my list, and I'm excited about the Magic this year. Probably my expectation for the biggest jump in basketball this year. Tons of talent all over. Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero are like the dream combination of potential young superstars you could ask for. Jalen Suggs might be kind of looking like he's going to lock in that fifth starter role, which really has to make you feel the most comfortable because now you have a five that you really like. Jonathan Isaac is back in a limited role, making an impact. Defensively, he changes the game and really allows you to cover for some of this youth and some of this inexperience. And then really it's just me. It's what do you do with Anthony Black? How quickly do you bring him along? You know, I didn't think Jet Howard would have much of an impact on this season, but I definitely didn't think Anthony Black would be starting the season DNP'd. That probably can change pretty quickly and easily. Maybe there's a decision lingering on Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, and Markelle Fultz, one of those three. And then if that happened, I think it would be pretty – I mean, it almost is a virtual certainty. One of those three guys isn't – I just don't see where I don't see the future here. If it's those three guys and Anthony Black, I just don't see where the future is. So my common sense brain is saying, hey, probably Cole Anthony gets moved, then Anthony Black gets the minutes he's been deserving. But maybe they look at it a different way. They get more for Fultz. You get maybe Suggs is the guy you don't believe as much in. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much where the Magic are. And then the final team in this division, the Washington Wizards, a team that I think plenty of people are going to be looking at as a potential 30th worst team in the NBA this year. I don't know if I can go that far because, man, this team can get some damn buckets. But there's no way in the world that they're going to be close to top 15 defense either, So it feels pretty fair to say they'll at least be a lottery team by the end of it when it all shakes out. Pretty much the only interesting part of this team in my mind is just, who do you potentially shop? Because I like Tyus Jones, I like Jordan Poole, I like Kyle Kuzma. I like Corey Kispert. Bilal Coulibaly is going to take a little bit to adjust, but I like his potential. They like Denny. I don't know if I like Denny as much. I like Daniel Gafford. I don't know if I love Daniel Gafford. There's just a lot of those questions on this roster. So, and really one guy who I feel like of this group can be an elite defender, and he's a rookie who's barely understanding basketball right now. So yeah, I don't really think that team is going to sneak into the playoffs being as bad as they're probably going to be on the defensive end. But they're not going to – I don't think they're going to be the 30th worst team in basketball. I think injuries can make them that. I just think that's too much going on. Actually, let me go back. There is one hilarious Jordan Poole Swaggy P moment where he did the Steph, I'm going to shoot, turn around, and then that ball bounced right off the rim. So maybe they are the 30th worst team. I don't know. Denver Nuggets. I don't know if y'all heard. These guys won the championship. They're really good. Nikola Jokic, really good. Jamal Murray, really good. Aaron Gordon, one of the most important utility defenders in basketball. KCP, keep championship players. This guy can have a worst shooting night in the world, still be one of the most impactful players in the game. That's tough right there. They look great so far to start this season. Reggie Jackson looks like a great potential sixth man of the year candidate. The way they have that team set up, it kind of helps him defensively. I don't think he adds a ton, but They are a team defense. They have a concept. They don't have great individual defenders as much as they have great buy-in to a system. Zignagi will be an interesting person to look at in this. He just got paid, but it wasn't necessarily got paid to play money, got paid to see what he is money, and then probably maybe there's some movement with that contract later down the road. In my mind, Peyton Watson is really who I'm excited about. I think that he fills in the Jeff Green role pretty well. Not going to have the IQ yet, but pretty much everything else. So I'm really excited about Peyton Watson. I think that'll end up being a guy that works for them. They've been going back and forth with Jalen Pickett and Julian Strother on the minutes. I don't know if those guys are going to get enough to actually try to impact this team. It's going to be that's a big ask when you're talking about a title winner, but you have to remember no Vlaco Conchar. So that's most likely going to, open a little bit more opportunity. I don't think Jamal Murray will play 82 games, even without an injury. So, opportunities there. We'll just see. It'll be interesting to see who the Nuggets actually put their faith into. Maybe even potentially to replace a Reggie Jackson if that doesn't work out. Minnesota Timberwolves. Year 2 of the Gobert experiment should be much more successful. I definitely think I'm higher on the potential for the Timberwolves this season than maybe most people. I think there's a ton of sharks in the water when it comes to Karl Anthony Towns in his future, but I think that there's no reason for Minnesota not to put all their chips into this and at least see it through another full season. So I'm going to go ahead and bury the Karl Anthony Towns rumors right now. The Jaden McDaniels stuff is a little interesting. I think he's questionable for the next game, so we'll probably get him back sooner than later. That was the only thing that kind of worried me. I think they really need a guy like Jaden McDaniels as much as anything to fit this entire unit, to fit the issues that the offense is going to have sometimes between the superhero ball and Anthony and Karl sort of learning how to pass that torch in that ebb and that flow that's really kind of difficult, really underappreciated difficult with star players on the same team. The end of the bench is an interesting concept to look at. It's probably where you nitpick them the most. You like your Kyle Andersons, you love your Naz Reeds, you really like what Nickeil Alexander-Walker's turned into, but you don't know what the consistency of a Shake Milton's going to look like. I've got to be honest with you, I don't think Troy Brown's going to be that impactful. Wendell Moore isn't even getting a shot over the other youngsters, a guy that was drafted after him in the same year. I love Leonard Miller. I don't know that they trust him enough to fill a role without an injury stepping up or an injury causing it. So, I think Leonard Miller's sort of your X factor here because that adds another really long athletic defender to a team that already has quite a bit of that. Mike Conley, really, that's kind of the guy that you want to see what his season ends up looking like. Because he's really the one that I feel like can bring that ebb and that flow to this team. But ultimately, a lot of it's on Rudy. A lot of it's on how he impacts the game this season. And if he can get back to an all defensive form, and I do think he could very easily, this team should be one of the top 4 teams in the West if they do that. I don't know that I'll have them I don't know if I will lock that in, but I really like what Minnesota's potential is this season, and it'll be interesting to see how much they can live up to that. Oklahoma City is probably everyone else's version of my Orlando Magic, where everyone's looking at Oklahoma City to take the biggest jump forward. I'm looking at them a little skeptical, a little iffy. I feel like there's maybe a little too many cooks in the kitchen. I love the top end talent. I think Shea is obviously one of the best players in basketball. I worry about Josh Giddey's fit with them in the starting role. Maybe a bench role is down the path, and maybe that's a little bit more fruitful for everyone. But one of the things that concerns me, I think, the most here is there's too many youngsters, right? And the way that they're prioritizing it is understandable, but it's also risky. Usman Jang, Vasilije Micic, really talented pieces. Micic, they've been trying to get him over for years. You know what I mean? I think Philly had his rights originally. Usman Deng, very talented young kid, pretty raw still. You get why both of those guys deserve to incrementally get be part of the rotation. But it also is unfortunate because guys like Trey Mann, Aaron Wiggins, Poku to some extent are going to feel like they've earned those minutes and they're not going to get them. And then you're going to be looking at kind of a more ugly locker room potentially, I guess, or at least forcing your hand in making moves that you don't necessarily want to make. So for that reason, I still think the Thunder are probably just a play-in team in a tough Western Conference. But Chet Holmgren is a hell of a player. He and Shea really have the potential to take this franchise and lift them into contender status almost by themselves if they continue to pan out and continue to go down this path. So there's a lot of variation here, but I don't think the bottom is there. I think you'd have to go through some pretty bad injuries for the Thunder to stay a lottery team. Well, I guess you'd lose the play in your lottery team. To stay a true lottery team. But I do think it's possible, unfortunately. They could end up being a lottery team by not winning the play-in again. But that would be a disappointment. I mean, they're looking at the 6th seed, the 7th seed, the 8th seed, and being like, why not? There's no reason not to, and I agree. Portland Trailblazers, kind of the opposite side of this. I think there's plenty of good money that's going to say that they're the 30th worst team in basketball this year. That's not the worst situation to be in, given all the talent you have. It is an interesting position because I don't hate this group. I actually really like it. Other than the Anthony Simons getting injured, this team kind of looked like a solid group that maybe would at least have, like Utah did last year, a nice start to the season and then probably tail off into who they really are. But maybe not. Maybe it's just going to be a really rough year for them. We haven't seen a lot of DeAndre Ayton winning in his career, by himself. It's not fair to put it on him. Obviously, he's never really been by himself, but it's hard to believe that he is the sole vessel through which winning happens is the best way to put it, I think. Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe are immense talents. Still feel like there's a lot of growing to be done there. Jeremy Grant kind of feels like a man without a country here, where it's like, I don't think he's that mad about his situation, but at the same time, he's not, you're kind of you're stat padding for a lottery team, and that doesn't feel great. Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, Matisse Thybulle, not necessarily similar positions because I don't think any of those players are the same level of the potential Jeremy has, but all three of those guys could be very, very, very useful to a title contender this season. So maybe the rich get richer with the Trailblazers and they end up moving those guys and then adding assets down the road. But yeah, there's no good way to put it that you trade your star player, your franchise is probably the best all-time player. It's going to be tough. Utah is a season away from doing what I just talked about, although not the franchise's best players, but two of the franchise's best all-time players. They're sneaky worst candidates for the worst team in the league. And I might even put them 30th if I was to power rank. A lot of questions here. They're really young. There's not a lot of established roles. I love Jordan Clarkson. I don't really know why Utah thinks they need to hold on to him. If I'm being honest, I feel like that's a player that could be better used somewhere else. Lauri's fine. They want to build around Lauri. It's going to be a process. Taking a flyer on John Collins is fine. Maybe not the future, but it's fine. I don't really know what Taylor Horton Tucker's future is. It doesn't feel efficient. It feels like it's a bench player. It feels like a high efficiency bench player, maybe. Walker Kessler's good, but he is what he is. I'm a little concerned with the Akbaji lack of minutes. I'm very happy with the Keontae George minutes, but I'm also looking at that as another sign of possibly being one of the worst teams because Keontae's a great talent, another DFW kid, but that's a little bit of a task right there to be contending with it. And then you're still prioritizing Chris Dunn and Kelly Olynyk over Simone Fontecchio, your first round pick, Taylor Hendricks. some other talented guys like Bryce Sensabaugh, Omer Yurtseven, which, whatever on that one. But, just it's just an interesting one. Krista and Kelly Olynyk, both absolutely NBA players. For Utah, what does that mean? How long does this last? This is probably the better question. How long before they say, hey, look, we need to see what Simone Bethke is. Please give this guy some minutes. What do we need to do to make? Is there somebody that has to go? Is something that's happened? I don't know. We need to know who this guy is so we can figure out a future. For that division, Denver should repeat, though Minnesota certainly could contend with that. And I think the worst team is probably going to be the Utah Jazz. The Western Pacific. The Mean Girls or whatever the Mean Girls clique was of the NBA, I would call the Western Pacific. There's just very catty behavior in this division regularly. But we'll start with the Warriors. An old team, but not too old. We had a lot of jokes comparing them to, 2 years ago's Lakers team. Not that bad. But there's obviously there's something to be, there's a little bit of scariness to have Chris Paul, to be relying on Chris Paul to remedy the situation. However, so far, it kind of seems like he is. I don't think he'll stay a starter necessarily. But with Curry playing as fucking good as he ever has, all CP really has to do, we knew this when he got there, is just make sure that the Steph Curry-less minutes aren't absolutely fucking zero negative butthole. And so far, so good. And that's all you can really ask for. I mean, their defense doesn't look good, but I'm not really expecting it to be right now. Draymond hasn't played his first game yet. And even when he's back, that'll probably still take some time. Jonathan Kuminga's development is kind of the biggest X factor here to me. You get a full season of Andrew Wiggins, obviously, that might have really changed the way last year ended. I like Dario Saric. He makes the offense feel like it's useful when the starters aren't necessarily in there, but defensively, he's not giving me a goddamn thing in my mind. Gary Payton Jr., obviously very happy to have him back defensively. That's a big deal. Moses Moody looks cooler on the other side of the pillow every time they ask him to do anything. So really, again, you're just looking right at Jonathan Kuminga and you're like, who are you? What are you? And what can you do right? Because if it's not what we need, Clippers. Pretty make or break season, and you already kind of have some weirdness there. Not a lot of weirdness, just a weird moment in a last second shot that they lost. Again, I mentioned the box score earlier for the game. Russell Westbrook had less than a second to grab a free ball and toss up a prayer. And in the corner of it, you see a Kawhi Leonard break down like the ball should have come to him. I don't know if he's just in despair because it's a tough loss or if he thinks he should have got the ball. People are reading it as the latter. I don't know if I want to go that far just yet because it's like I feel like I give Kawhi the benefit of the doubt, knowing that maybe he's just upset that they lost that game, not necessarily that Russ took the shot. Because like literally, there's no human physical way that he could have got the ball to Kawhi Leonard. But either way, that may be nothing, but maybe everything. Kawhi and PG have not produced much in the way of serious title threats since they've gotten to the Clippers. The best they've done is getting to the Western Conference Finals, which is nice because it's the first time in history. It probably gets your jersey retired for both guys. But at the end of the day, this is a team that wants to compete for titles, and they share a city with a team that is tied for the most titles in the league. That's just naturally going to cause issues. Obviously, health, and more health for this team is the biggest key. The talent is fine, but I don't feel like this is the top end. This is a top end team in the modern NBA. I don't. There is a great trade chip in Marcus Morris Sr. as far as his salary number. If they can figure out the assets to make it work, I'm kind of glad they're staying away from James Harden. I don't necessarily understand why they would want the James Harden. Although I guess maybe Russell Westbrook sixth man is the goal there. Maybe. Either way, Terrence Mann starting the season out is also not awesome because that's sort of the most important one, probably the most important glue guy, most important glue guy outside of the Nuggets guys. So yeah, that's probably the ones that that's probably the biggest thing for me is I don't hate this Clippers team entirely. I'd love to see a Robert Covington renaissance. I love to see Bones Highland take those comments from his former GM personally and really establish himself as a bench scorer. But yeah, it doesn't feel like a top end team. It really doesn't. And we know Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are supposed to be the difference makers there, but then it just goes back to will they be there? And it's hard to predict that. Speaking of health, and more health in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Lakers. Lakers. LeBron James. For the most part, it's hard to get a read on those two teams because, well, they're very polarizing. Literally, you can just say their names. People are just everyone's got an opinion on either the Lakers, LeBron James, or both, right? For me, it's not that hard. LeBron James is in year 21. I do think that he's trying to play 25 years. I think that kind of means pacing it out, kind of means taking a real back seat in the offseason, not only just in minutes and games, but on the court is understanding how to be a more off-ball player, understanding where to impact the game as sort of an energy bunny sometimes too. And it really means that Anthony Davis has to be the best player on this team most of the 48 minutes of most of the 82 games. And if it's not the case, then this Lakers team is destined to rot from the inside out, the way it has been from more of this Anthony Davis LeBron tenure than it hasn't. And I'm not putting all that blame on those guys necessarily, but it is just a fact of the situation at this point. You have 2 seasons that are really exciting, really a season and a half. And then you have a lot of kind of bad. Well, I guess the 2021 season wasn't awful. It just the injuries destroyed that group, even though I didn't think that group had a title shot. Sorry, Laker fans. Either way, I love the retaining D'Lo at a good price. I love all the comments he's making. I don't quite see it on the court yet, but Rome wasn't built in a day. The biggest positive I would say is he and Gabe Vincent really feel like they give the Lakers the ability to feed Anthony Davis the ball in a way they haven't had in a while, or they haven't had consistently in a while. And that could be the biggest difference for both the team and Anthony Davis. I know it sounds simple, but if you go look at Wembanyama, they're struggling to figure out how to get him the ball because he's so damn big. It's feeding the post is not as easy as it sounds. It's not just as simple as dumping off to the guy who's going to destroy. Early in the season, Darvin Ham is prioritizing Cam Reddish and Christian Wood. I'm fine with that because I know it's the business. But Rui Hachimura being down in minutes, I don't love that for him. I don't love that for the Lakers. I just have so much confusion there. And then Max Christie, I think that's a talented young player. Don't really see why he's not a contributor on this roster yet or getting his shot. That probably changes. We shall see. The Phoenix Suns are the next team up to bat. You have Mr. Kevin Durant carrying the load pretty heavily early on. Bradley Beal and Devin Booker both kind of dealing with some nagging injuries. They clearly want to prioritize getting that shit straight now. Fine with that. It's also a great chance to really empty out this bench. There's a lot of interchangeable parts that I think are looking to establish themselves as the guys that can be the extra pieces to winning a title for Phoenix. I think they're going to be an elite offense, no doubt. I still wonder if they're going to get to that top 15 defensive window. And really, they need to be a top 10 defense. But if they just get to top 15 with this offense, I could believe that that's still a title contender. Guys like Nas Little, Jordan Goodwin, Yuta Watanabe, they're going to be massive difference makers for this group. And frankly, that's going to be sort of the thing I'm kind of looking at the most, right? What are you going to give us consistently? And do they need to shuffle in some new guys to fit these roles? You need lanky defensive guys that can knock down open shots. And I think that with Nasir Little and Yuta Watanabe, you get that. You need some sort of point guard to back up Devin Booker. I think Jordan Goodwin can do that. Even though I don't think he's a great shooter by any means necessarily. I just think that he's an impacting player. The Sacramento Kings. last year's big surprise. Basically the same team. They paid Harrison Barnes to come back. They did add EuroLeague star Sasha Vezenkov, who I actually really do like myself. I think he's a really interesting glue guy, very in the Bojan Bogdanovic blend of these European stars that aren't necessarily worried about being superstars here, but that know that they can compete at a high level as a role player. Breaking that curse was hard. It's going to be even harder to replicate the success. JaVale, not an awful attempt to fix the size, but probably not good enough. What do you end up doing down the road is important here. It's still a fun team. I still really like them, but defensively, I don't see where you take that upgrade to actually capitalize on what this offense could be. They have a great defensive-minded head coach, but frankly, they still lack a lot in the personnel department. Coming down to the final division, the West Southwest. Oh, actually, I need to pick that division too. Ugh. Okay. I'll pick the Suns. And then I'll pick the Clippers to have the worst record. All right. Sorry. Dallas Mavericks. This is a good one. I should have saved it for last, but fuck. I'm happy. I'm very happy. I'm not a Mavericks fan. I'm a Mavericks not a Mavericks hater. I'm a Cowboys fan, a Rangers fan. I will root for the Stars, even though I don't know shit about hockey. I root for the FC Dallas. I worked for FC Dallas. I don't know shit about soccer. I don't root for the Mavericks like that. It's hard. You know what I mean? This is life. This is the life. So it's hard for me to prioritize one of my children. But I will say that I'm a proud papa so far when it comes to the early returns on this year's Mavericks. Mostly Luka, because I think with a lot of the Mavericks issues, I've also been like, cool. But even if they did what they're supposed to, has Luka done everything? Is Luka truly where he needs to be to contend? This year, it sort of feels like he's responding to me as, yes, bitch, I am. And I'm excited about that. I think that it's not just the shape, it's the energy, it's the effort, it's obviously the points and the rebound and assists. I mean, you can go look at the fucking stat sheet for that. It's just an energy with the kid, and it feels like he's taking it as seriously as he's ever taken it. And that is the first key to really going towards a title. Is your best player has to absolutely 100%, without question, be locked in on that goal. Otherwise, no one else follows it. Omax, not looking like he's going to crack into the rotation anytime soon. I'm sure that'll change down the road with opportunity, but he'll really have to earn his keep this year, where it kind of looked like he might be a starter. On the other hand, Derek Lively outplayed Victor Wembanyama on opening night, and that was pretty impressive. I wouldn't say that was a demonstrative outplay. When we got into foul trouble, that hurts a lot, but ultimately, Lively he was the energy. He basically won the Mavs that game. Putbacks, easy lobs from Luka. He is everything the Mavericks have been needing since way back when 41 was still wearing the jersey, and in his prime. Obviously, the Tyson Chandler stuff is been beat to death, but it's true. I mean, you could hear him yelling on the court. This is a rookie defensive player, defensive center communicating. And that's rare. So a lot of times when you're like, oh, how good can you be with a rookie defensive center? It's like, well, fuck. I mean, if he's Walker Kessler just did it last year. I mean, that team wasn't super successful for a lot of reasons, but he was really successful. So I'm kind of bullish on it. Kyrie hasn't shot the ball well, but he looks well in the flow. He looks fine as far as his body goes. Just looks like he hasn't really played basketball a lot in the offseason, and his shot just looks a little flat. I don't expect that to keep up at all. So really you're talking about the issue for the Mavericks being Love Hardaway, at least as a six-man. If you trade him, that's fine. I trust Hardaway for what his job is as a six-man. But that's it. Josh Green. I like Josh Green. Don't love Josh Green. Glad they got him under contract. Don't mind that moving or just trusting him as much as you can. We talked about Luka and Kyrie. Why would I ever not want those two guys? Derek Lively, we like a lot. Grant Williams is not going to always have the best stat lines, but I do think that that's a very productive, useful player for this group. Where I struggle is that's pretty much it with the guys that I trust. I don't know what to expect from Maxi Kleber long term this season. Derek Jones Jr. is starting, and I still don't understand how or why. Dante Exum, I'm excited about. I want to sell myself on it, but I can't. The minutes have not been there yet. Seth Curry, similar. Is it now? Are we now too far past the Seth Curry prime that he's just a veteran now? That could kind of come off and get you some buckets in the regular season, but nothing else. Rashawn Holmes, we've kind of been known about this, and it's unfortunate. The Dwight Powell renaissance could definitely happen this year because if they play him at the correct role he should have always been played at. I don't think Markieff Morris is a useful player at this point. And then Omax and Jaden Hardy, I mean, get him some minutes. I need to know who the fuck these guys are, especially Jaden Hardy at this point. Like, I need to know if I can flip this guy for something. I need to know if this guy can contribute to my basketball team. Can he take Tim's job if I trade to Tim? You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at with the Mavs. The other second on this list, third and probably the reality of this season, Houston Rockets make up our next Texas team. They're an interesting group. They're going to have a bunch of vets that are cashing those checks, a bunch of youngsters jockeying for his position, and a hard-ass defensive-minded coach. That could probably be bad. Their rookie Thompson put up the worst. I think it was the worst PER or worst box minus performance since his teammate Jalen Green. So that's awesome. You don't have Tari Eason, who I really love as one of those high level glue guys down the road to kind of mend the gap between Jabari Smith and Alperen Sengun, who kind of feel like maybe they're fighting for the same job long term. Maybe that's the same thing with Thompson and with Jalen Green. I like Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet, Jeff Green. Those aren't bad locker room guys, I don't think necessarily. Dylan Brooks, I guess, probably a little suspect. But ultimately, it does kind of feel like they're all just vets cashing checks. You know what I mean? And that can rot the room. That can rot the room, and it's not a great room to begin with. You know, you're talking about one of the cultures that have been the most attacked in recent years in Houston. So you want to see step in the right direction from this group, but I've got to be honest, I don't know that I predict it. I feel like this is a very likely team to bottom out again, and I don't think it would be the 30th worst team because I really like Jalen Green and I really like Jabari Smith Jr. And I really don't mind Alperen Sengun, and I think you can cover for that kind of player, but I don't think this team can cover for that kind of player. But we shall see. Yeah, and I realized that Jock Longdale on my roster twice here, so great start to the season for my lineups. Memphis Grizzlies. As we wind this thing down, Grizzlies are off to an 0-3 start because they do not have Ja Morant. They are kind of rudderless, and that's not awesome. I think they have plenty of talent and time, obviously. They're still going to be, like 20 more games without Ja? That could end up really doing them in the West. Maybe it's a blessing down the road if the pick ends up nice, but it's kind of worrying. It's kind of worrying. I like Marcus Smart. I think he's a great player. I don't know that he can band-aid this. Even when Ja comes back, you're still out Steven Adams and Brandon Clark for most of the season, at least on Clark's behalf. You're completely without Steven Adams. So now, although these aren't necessarily the same positions, but is it Zaire Williams? Is it Jake LaRavia? Is it Big Body Roddy? Who comes out of here and kind of establishes themselves as another lock? Because at this point, I mean, John Conchar is like the most reliable player, and it's not even because he's scoring. He's just you're getting consistent positive productivity out of him. And at that point, that's all this team needs. It's at least when it's healthy, and so it's a little tough. It kind of makes me feel like a lot of this season is going to be to start off. A lot of just Derrick Rose homecoming stuff for the fans. And then let's just try to unbury whatever the fuck we get stuck in because of this jaw suspension. And honestly, maybe Taylor Jenkins might be the most screwed out of all of this. Poor dude. But the game is the game. The New Orleans Pelicans make up our second to last team before we finish this. Pretty simple group here. Looks like we're going to get the first full healthy season of Zion Williamson in his career. That's a pretty big deal. Brandon Ingram has taken a leap, and putting those two together with the kind of talent they have on that roster, you're looking at not just a play-in team, but a team that damn sure better qualify within that top 6 if it's all healthy, right? But the West is tight. Some people are going to not be happy with their seeding at the end of this year. And perhaps shooting is the thing that gets this team at the end. I don't think I trust Dyson Daniels as a shooting threat. They're trying really hard with Matt Ryan in hopes that sticks. Of course, Trey Murphy was injured for the season, and that's pretty much as big of a gut blow for that position as you could get. So I guess you're kind of in a position where rookie Jordan Hawkins, someone I really like a lot, you're going to have to trust him a lot to be able to play the defense necessary for you to actually contend this year, and be that spark plug this season. Because I feel like that's pretty much it. I mean, you look at a roster that Herb Jones can be your defensive anchor. Jonas Valanciunas is a great defensive player, or a great 5, so defensive player, but a useful 5 that I think you can spell with Larry Nance Jr. to help you be more defensively mindset. Zion's defense is going to be the biggest question. We haven't seen enough of that in his career, and what we have seen hasn't necessarily shown that he's going to be a lockdown superstar stud defensive player. So that progression will be important to watch, although he is still going to be one of the most entertaining players in basketball. So, yeah, I think the Pelicans are a very interesting team. I think they have to be a playoff or bust type group. But at the end of the day, there's some issues here that I think could end up capping them out a little bit lower than preseason hopes. And then finally, to bring this to a head, hopefully before an hour and a half, the Spurs are back, baby. Well, they may not win a lot of games this season. My guess is they'll probably be closer to 500 than not. But Victor Wembanyama is the real deal, folks. There's no need to sugarcoat it. This is a very impressive player. I think that at this point, everybody's seen all of this stuff. I don't really know how much more I could go on to break it down. It's truly it's very new. There's not a whole lot to compare it to. It's just a new experience for all of us. And I like San Antonio is not afraid to bring him along just as slowly as they brought along anyone. That stays consistent for their culture. And I think at the end of it, it's really just kind of fun to just see the guy be everything we build him up to be. It's kind of the little things for me. Bench decorum doesn't matter that much. A lot of times people get a little too carried away in that. But you just look at that kid when he's on the bench, and he is just dead eyes on the court, staring it up and down, watching everything as it's happening. I honestly almost want to say that he's learning as much off the court when he's on the bench than he is when he actually is playing. League fucked for sure. It's not perfect, but yeah, the Spurs are definitely going to be playoff contenders as soon as next season, I would think. I don't think it's out of the question this season. I just think that there's a little bit of an uphill battle. I don't know that I love all of the fit. Point Sohan has looked good. I don't know if it's looked great. There's still some of the Zach Collins, Jetty Osman, Keldon Johnson, who am I and what am I to this team, to this league stuff that kind of makes me a little worried. But I do think that ultimately the Spurs like all three of those guys. So it's not like you're worried about, their opinion on the franchise's opinion on them. They're just trying to figure out who they actually are in the hierarchy of this team and this league. which I think is hard to figure out. You have Doug McDermott, you have Devontae Graham, both guys that I think could be rotation players for another roster that probably won't crack the rotation as hard. I mean, McDermott is right now, but not necessarily Devontae Graham. So it'll be an interesting one to see how that plays out, especially with guys like City Cisco, Blake Wesley on the bench that I'm sure by the end of the season they really want to get good minutes for. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Spurs. Quick catch up. For that division, I am going to pick the Dallas Mavericks to win it. And for the worst record in that division, I am going to pick the Houston Rockets because obviously you guys can use this against me if Houston's good. I'm fine with it. But like, come on, Houston. Anyway, that took way longer than I expected, but I'm glad we got it out of the way. You can't say you don't know more about the NBA moving forward. And we won't be this consistently dense about it moving forward either. So now that we have a big general sense of where the league is, let's get into the season. We're going to do the Texas two-step, and we'll keep an eye on Houston. We'll be nice to Houston, or maybe we'll just laugh at Houston. I'll put my Spurs and Mavericks stuff on and just pretend like I'm the worst person alive. That'll be fun. So love everyone. Enjoy your weeks. Enjoy sports, but remember, there's more to life than just that goofy ass football, basketball, baseball, hockey, puck, bowling pin. What did they use in cricket? I need to ask mine. I need to figure that out. Whatever. Go out there, enjoy life too. But thank you for loving sports, and thank you for watching Pass the Rock.